What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of District Baseball. You're here with Nick and Trey, as today we talk about the Hall of Fame ballot. We give our votes, we talk about the ballots that we've seen submitted so far, and everything in between. It is going to be a very, I would say, contentious episode, but I think actually we're on the same page with the guys we want to see stay on the ballot in terms of staying above 5%, the guys that shouldn't be getting votes that are, and the guys that definitely deserve to be in, but the Hall of Fame voters are a bunch of snobs. Regardless, we'll talk about all of that today. Trey, what's going on?
Getting excited for another off season of Hall of Fame discourse that always goes well.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, so we're gonna do our Hall of Fame votes, and if you can't tell by our tones, we're more big Hall type guys. We're gonna vote for quite a few of these
Yep.
guys, and I think that you should at least vote for probably at least five of them. But some people with the votes that do or have access to the votes that don't do that. So um, we don't have votes, so we're just going to do something theoretical and fun. So if you have your picks, make sure to leave them in the comments as well. Nick, where do you want to start?
I think the logical place to start is to just give our ballots.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we can kind of talk about the guys that I think are shoo-ins. In my case, and you kind of alluded to it, all the guys I'm voting for, I really think should be in the Hall of Fame. And, that might sound pretty self explanatory, but it's not when you're thinking about the Hall of Fame vote, because sometimes you want to vote for guys just to get them enough percentage of the total vote to stay on the ballot, which again, you need 5% to stay on the ballot year after year. And then you get a max of 10 years. And if you don't get in after 10 years, you fall off the ballot. Or if you don't retain your 5% or don't even hit 5%, you're just off the ballot after that year. So, Trey, I think you're going to have some guys you vote for that are more so to keep them on the ballot for a discussion later down the line.
You have
Um,
one.
yeah. So, like, in that case, it's definitely a discussion. You just want to see them stick around. You don't want to close the door. But for my case, I have 9 votes. All 9 of my guys, I really think should be in the Hall of Fame, obviously for different reasons, but we'll talk about all of that. So if you're looking at the Hall of Fame ballot, we're going to go column by column. The first one that I think is a shoe in, maybe not the safest word to use, but a guy who I think deserves to be in, that's Carlos Beltran. Carlos Beltran was always like a really, really good hitter. The one concern I have of him is the whole sign stealing stuff. And something we probably need to mention when we're doing, um, our votes and going through this conversation. Just the character clause is a real thing. Whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, it just is. And as kind of slap on the wrist as the sign stealing stuff was, Beltran took a lot of the hit or a lot of the blame for it. Whether it was truly him or not, we'll never know. So I think with how snooty some of these Hall of Fame voters are submitting blank ballots and egregious things like that, I do think Beltran might face some obstacles in his pursuit to be a Hall of Famer. But like if you look at his stats, like he was very, very good, played till he was 40, which I think longevity, I mean, I know longevity matters, but like playing late into your 30s proves something as well. Like you weren't just a front loaded, you performed, you kind of stat padded a lot of your career stats in your early to late 20s, and then did nothing when you're 30. Like Beltran was steady throughout, and I think he deserves to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, it's a consistency factor with
Right.
Beltran, the longevity. He had that. He had the hitting. He had the field, the glove, and he had the stolen base. And I think that he was just a very, very good hitter, a very, very good fielder, and a very, very good base runner. And you put all that together, you have an elite player. Um, so yeah, the sign stealing scandal. I was a little concerned, and then I saw that he got almost 50% of the vote on his first pass around. So I
Yeah,
think
that's
he's gonna
fair.
be
Worth
fine.
mentioning. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's not gonna be a guy that makes it this year, but he will. Uh, but he'll make it before 10. He'll probably make it within the next 5 years, I would think.
Yeah. Agreed. And then, that's another thing with the voting. People are like, "Oh, I'm not going to vote for this guy this year because I don't want him to be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Which I do that, by the way,
I
for
think it's
steroid
so
guys.
stupid. If you're a Hall of Famer, you're a Hall of Famer.
For
Like I think
steroid guys specifically, I have a little
the real
hitch.
distinction is unanimous or not, or how much of the vote you got. Like I remember, was it Jeter or Griffey or someone where one guy didn't vote for
Yeah,
them?
Griffey didn't.
Yeah,
The
because
only unanimous is Mariano,
Mariano. Yeah,
which is
where
crazy.
one guy didn't vote for that. I think it was Griffey,
Yeah, it
just
was.
so he wouldn't be unanimous. Like what
Yeah,
the
well, Griffey didn't
like.
do roids. That's my only thing. If you did roids, I'm not letting you be a first ballot. But that's my only
I
stipulation,
mean,
really.
we'll talk about that later on with
Yeah,
some of the guys on the ballot, but to me, it's like if Hall of Famer, yes or no. Next guy on the list is, in my opinion, one of the best players ever never to win an MVP. And part of it is just the era he played in, or at least the prime of his career in that era.
I
A lot
got
of
something for
steroid
this.
era. Oh, Adrian Beltre. I
Mm-hmm.
think he is. If you want to dive into the, oh, should he be a first ballot guy? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, he should. Like MVPs be damned. He is very good. And if you're going to be a big proponent of the character clause, it has to work both ways. Like that's just how it should work and how it has to work if you're
I
going to
agree.
really be that intense about it. And Adrian Beltre was a phenomenal ambassador of the game. Like just you can go down a long YouTube rabbit hole of all the top moments of Adrian Beltre just having fun on the baseball field and just being a really good uh
Just having fun, man.
representative of the
That's an
game.
off season. Every off season, I go
Yeah,
down that rabbit hole at least
and
once.
it's like you can't in a vacuum you can't vote for a guy to be a Hall of Famer just because he's a good guy. But like if you compile that with Adrian Beltre's goodness stats, yeah, he's a Hall of Famer,
Oh yeah,
no doubt.
and it's not even particularly close. He has like over 90 career WAR. I mean, I know WAR's not
Which is
everything,
unheard
but
of nowadays,
oh
by
yeah,
the
for
way.
sure. And he's a guy who didn't even really. I mean, he had a great season in 2004, and this is what I was going to talk about with the MVP stuff. He finished second in 04. I don't know if you remember this guy Barry Bonds. He had like a 1400 OPS that season. He won the award.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's your freaking MVP season for Beltre. But yeah, he never won one, but he was clearly good enough. And amazing defensive third baseman. I don't think it gets talked about as much as like Roland. Adrian Beltre and Scott Rowland are very, very similar defenders, and Adrian Beltre had more offensive capabilities.
Right.
And another thing about Beltre is he acquired most of his WAR after age 30. I mean, this dude was a really late bloomer when he was on the Rangers. That was the best part of his career. He was in his mid 30s by the time, I think late 30s by the time that was over. So he
Mm-hmm.
had the longevity and he had the stats. It's and he had the good guy aspect. Like
Right.
I agree. If you're gonna punish dudes that were, kind of dickheads, like Jeff Kent, for example, who I had last year, you might as well elevate the dudes who are good for the game.
Mm-hmm.
And Adrian Beltre, there's no excuse not to vote for him. Really, I don't think you can point to one. So he's got to be a
Yeah.
first ballot.
Yeah. Like maybe this is very loose, like never winning a World Series, but even then, it's
Great
baseball.
postseason performer, though. I
Right.
mean,
It's
he in the World
baseball.
Series he hit. It wasn't his fault.
Right.
Go look at those numbers. I mean, they're pretty crazy
Yeah.
in that World Series with him. But yeah, I mean, great postseason performer just adds to it. I mean, first ballot easily.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, moving on. And I do want to clarify that Trey and I did not have the same exact votes. We had 8 that overlapped. I had 1 that he didn't vote for, and Trey had 2 that I did not vote for. But we'll talk about those after the consensus votes. The next guy on the list is someone who I think you and I won't have any issue with. Obviously, we're voting for him, but like any issue supporting his Hall of Fame candidacy. But amongst you know casual fans or MLB or Hall of Fame voters or whatever, there is a lot of discourse among his candidacy, and that's Todd Helton. The Coors effect is always going to be a thing. I think guys like Larry Walker getting in helps his cause a little bit.
Yes.
And I also do think there's like he played in Colorado. He also played for what 17 years. Like there's plenty of listen, there's at least 26 guys that play in Colorado every single year. Last time I checked, like they're not putting up the numbers that Todd Helton did.
Yeah.
Like Coors has been the same altitude for a long time. Last time I checked. So, you know, punishing them based on where they play, like they can't control where they play. Do they hit? Yes or no? Like that's kind of what it comes down to. And not everything in these votes and conversations will be as black and white as that. But like, why are we punishing guys for having a really long and very successful career? It just makes no sense in my opinion. So I think Todd Helton, I will say it's marginal. Like he's just getting in for me, but I'm also very comfortable naming him a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I agree. Larry Walker getting in pretty much made Todd Helton's candidacy a lock. He got 72% last year. He's probably going to make it this year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think he should. And yeah, I believe he had a 131 OPS plus on the road in his career. So it's not like he couldn't hit on the road. The dude was a great hitter all around. He just happened to play in Coors during the mid 2000s, which, you know, I will say one thing about the Coors effect is that it has become less so because the humidor and they used to have a short wall there, but it still is not enough to keep Todd Helton out of the Hall of Fame. This dude had two 400 total base seasons in a row. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Okay. It's like Todd Helton and Barry Bonds. Like seriously. So yeah, Todd Helton should be getting in on this, I believe his 7th try. I would think he gets in though, with having amassed 72% last year. But yeah, excellent hitter. The only real knock on him is that he wasn't the same level in his later years, but he was still pretty good. So yeah, he definitely has my vote.
Yeah, I was just trying to pull up his OPS on the road. All I'm seeing right now is his average. He's still a 285 hitter on the road.
So yeah, he was still like, it wasn't as good, obviously, but right. Still really good.
But yeah, it was enough to support his home. Was there a Coors boost? Yeah. But like it wasn't the difference between him being a Hall of Famer and him not being a Hall of Famer.
Let's just put it this way. He's not Dante Bichette. Okay.
Right.
Dante Bichette is a guy who got Coors. Okay. We can be honest about that. He was a bad hitter everywhere else. Okay. Mm-hmm. Todd Helton is not like that.
Agreed. All right. Next guy on the list. A very decorated player, was on some of the great teams down there in Atlanta, and was manning center field a lot of the time. And that's Andrew Jones. I've been banging this drum for a while now. And I think in a lot of guys' minds, like Andrew Jones is borderline. And, you know, again, this is all arbitrary. Like it's there's no like baseline for Hall of Fame voting. Like people use WAR only when it's convenient to them.
Yeah, right? every single voter is so much different in how they see the game. So it's just so hard to put like a general standard. But yeah.
Right. So like for Andrew Jones, he didn't wow you like with the offensive numbers aside from the home runs. I mean, 434 home runs in a career is like exceptional. Like there's nothing wrong with not hitting 500 home runs or only hitting 400 plus home runs. But like his career OPS is 823, just solid. Like not bad, but solid. 254 career hitter. Not bad, not great. So it's like in that regard, people will get so caught up in just the on paper numbers. Be like Andrew Jones wasn't a Hall of Famer, but like if you saw him play and on some of the best teams as well, like you realize Andrew Jones was a staple, right? He wasn't like some of the other guys we'll talk about on this list, or some of the other guys who have gotten in recently, where all of their production as a baseball player came on the offensive side of the ball. Andrew Jones hit home runs and played premier defense in center field. Like, is that not a Hall of Famer? Like what are we talking about?
That's the thing. It's like if you, so I mean, Andrew Jones is arguably, if not the best defensive center fielder ever.
Right.
And he hit 434 home runs. That's a Hall of
Like,
Famer.
right,
Right
exactly.
there.
So
That's as simple as it needs to be. The
yeah,
best center field defender ever also hit 434 home runs.
right. Yeah,
And he did it like he wasn't even playing by the time he was 34. I mean, this
yeah,
he
he
did
was
most of his
basically,
damage
yeah.
as like a freaking young 20s guy. Like it's crazy. His
Yeah,
career is
I
nuts
think
when you look at
post
it.
age 30, he hit like 40 home runs in
Yeah,
total.
and he wasn't the same defender, but like
Right.
all the production on those Braves teams is more than enough to be in the Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
in my
So
opinion.
so many of these Hall of Fame discussions have become so convoluted. Like Andrew Jones is a guy where I really like, hey, did he play great defense in arguably the hardest position to play? Yes.
One of them.
Was he on a great team consistently? Yes. Did he hit like, in any regards, whether it was home runs or on base or whatever? Yes. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
it's pretty simple, I think, with
move
Andrew
it on.
Jones.
Like Andrew Jones, Hall of Famer. Next guy on the list is someone, again, contentious for different reasons. And this is where we dive into the steroids of it all. You and I both voted for Alex Rodriguez. Um, Listen, you can feel however you want to feel about it. And to be honest, like there's not much I can say to like change your mind. That being said, look at where there are clear instances of like pointing to a season, you're like, he probably did steroids then. Yeah. But also look at the rest of his seasons too, where like he definitely wasn't, where it was pre or post. Basically, when I think A-Rod's steroid era, I really think Texas.
Yeah,
I think
Seattle A-Rod, I think personally was clean and
agreed.
was unbelievable.
Agreed. So it's like if you can't fully filter out all of the steroid era stuff, and you can't um not logistically, but just morally, whatever, you can't filter out the stuff. He did steroids, but there's also steroid users already in the Hall of Fame. So it's like if you're going to hinge your vote on that, then it's almost hypocritical in some regard. But like you look at A-Rod and the things he was able to accomplish around that Texas time, like the early 2000s, and you're just like, holy hell. Not to mention we don't know what his career would have looked like defensively because he was a really good shortstop and then moved to third base to kind of give way to, quite frankly, a lesser
A worse
shortstop.
defender.
Right. Like, and he played a great third base too. So it's just, this is where you really need to dive into the conversation. And in a lot of respects, I think a lot of people have already formed their opinion on A-Rod.
Yeah.
It's pretty cut and dry. Like if you look at A-Rod the player, it's you're unquestionably voting for him to be a Hall of Famer. If you're saying it's a no-go because of the steroids, you're not moving off of that. For me, I truly don't care about the steroids. And I know some people are going to disagree with that and hate that. But one, like I said, there's people in the Hall of Fame that have already tested positive. And two, it's just like, it's not an excuse, but it's the time frame they were playing in. It was so commonplace.
Yeah, there's plenty of guys who did steroids back then who were not on this ballot.
And then,
so
you're right, there's plenty of guys who did steroids and didn't get
that were
caught.
not this good.
Yeah, and then there's plenty of guys who did steroids and were nowhere near this good.
Yeah.
Like those are two unequivocal truths about the game. So it's just like, is there a boost? Yeah, but if you kind of like take away his Texas years, and he still has,
still insane.
over 500 home runs and probably a career WAR around like 80.
Yep.
I mean, it is what it is. But A-Rod's like one of the best players ever, in my opinion. And I don't think a Hall of Fame can truly exist if he's not in it.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing as well with the steroid guys. I don't like, for example, we'll get into it, but like, a guy like Rafael Palmeiro, probably a Hall of Famer without roids.
Mm-hmm.
With them, no. A-Rod is like has twice as much WAR as that guy. He had 2 Hall of Fame careers in one at 2 different positions. Mm-hmm. So he's at such an elite level that without steroids, which I do personally believe, this is just an opinion, but I do believe in Seattle he was clean, and he was still that good. So yeah, you tax him, you say, hey, I'm gonna take 30 WAR from you because of this, and he's still like well above Hall of Fame standards, and that's really the thing. He was that good, and you can't tell the story of this game without him.
Yep, agreed. Cut and dry. I think A-Rod's a
It's
Hall
the
of
same
Famer,
as Bonds and Clemens.
who
I
I
had
would have voted for as
me
well,
too,
by the way.
and I would have voted for them because again, they were so much better than their competition and so much better than other guys who did steroids at the same time as them. So it's tough, you know. I mean, and honestly, I can't really hate on people who don't give them votes because yeah, they did do steroids, but at the end of the day, some of them are still better than others. So
Right,
that's
exactly.
kind of how I see it.
And it comes down to like the point I mentioned. Like there was plenty of guys who did steroids that were nowhere near as good.
Yeah.
So it's just like you got to factor that into account or take that into account as well. All right, this next guy again is another likely to be widely debated candidate, and that's Joe Mauer. Joe Mauer, in my opinion, is a first ballot, no doubt Hall of Famer. He played catcher, which is honestly probably, in my opinion, as like with my baseball background, the hardest position to not only play but to be good at, to be an all-star Hall of Fame level. And not only did Joe Mauer do that, he did it while battling like an extremely long history of concussions that kind of severely altered what his outlook would have been like. Like he shifted to first base later in his career, but was still honestly solid. It's just, profiling him as a first baseman isn't fair because he wasn't a home run hitter. Mm-hmm. But like if you're factoring in what he did offensively as a catcher, there's very few guys in the history of baseball that did things better than Joe Mauer. And he's not a candidate yet, but it's the same reason in about 2 years or so, I'm voting for Buster Posey.
Like I'm so excited for when Buster Posey gets on a ballot because that's just going to be
because Buster Posey did things better than Joe Mauer did. He just didn't have the longevity.
Games. Yeah, I know.
In far few. So it's just like, again, I do have pitcher bias because that's my background, but like having a great catcher back there is like there's truly, and that's why you see pitchers have their personal catchers, right? And Joe Mauer did what he did, and he was everyone's personal catcher. So don't look at the WAR because like it won't be there. Don't look at the home runs because they won't be there. But look at the whole profile, and it's pretty easy to me to see why Joe Mauer is a Hall of Famer.
You can actually look at the F4 because he's got more F4 than a lot of guys that are in. Yeah. He's one of the most effective offensive catchers in terms of the hit tool. Because like you said, not a huge home run hitter, still had power, still slugged. But as a pure hitter, he was unbelievable. MVP winner as a catcher, that's tough, very tough to do. That season, by the way, insane. You should check out the numbers if you haven't. So he gets a bonus for the MVP there. And yeah, I think that he actually lost some defensive value just because, like you said, he had injuries and he had to move off of catcher in his early 30s because he was a good, solid defensive catcher. Maybe not the best at any point, but very, very good. And he was definitely the best hitting catcher at various points in his career. Mm-hmm. So I feel like and yeah, there's plenty of catchers. Catcher's tough with the WAR and everything because it's different than like other positions. It's normally lower because they normally don't play as long. And it's a lot of it's based on defense most of the time. Mm-hmm. But with Mauer, he was such a good, solid overall catcher, great on offense, really good on defense, and a leader. Hey, you want to talk about good guy clause? Joe Mauer. Right. I mean, played all his career in Minnesota. He's from there. It's like a perfect good guy clause player to vote for on top of the fact that he was elite and won an MVP. So I could understand if people maybe weren't, because like you said, if a Hall of Famer is a Hall of Famer, but maybe some people would leave him off and add him in a little bit of a weaker class, but I think he's good enough personally.
Agreed. All right, the next guy we voted for, I'll admit, I needed some convincing on my own because I left him off initially, and then I was doing kind of a deep dive and adjusted my bar a little bit based on the position he played. We both have Chase Utley on our ballot. Um, when I, granted, I caught the majority of the tail end of his career, and Chase Utley is a guy that did most of his damage in his, mid to late 20s. And then once he hit 30s, he was fine, but certainly not, like, we weren't thinking Hall of Famer, just based on that production in his 30s. But like Chase Utley was good for a long time, and longevity matters. And in his prime, in his peak, like that 27 to 32 range, give or take, he was very, very good with OPSs above 900, which from a second baseman is uncharacteristically good. And if you're looking at the Hall of Fame as a whole, like there isn't much love for the second baseman. And I think part of that is we're comparing the second baseman to the shortstops, to the third baseman. I don't think you can compare any position to the first baseman. But because like whether intentional or not, like second base right next to first base, some people might just be overshadowed by the first baseman they're playing next to. And obviously Lee played with some great ones like Ryan Howard, who, was known for dropping bombs. But I I can see why you might not want to put him in. But again, I think if you kind of adjust the bar a little bit, based on him being a second baseman and a pretty good second baseman at that, like it's not just like, oh, he played second base, like forget about it. Like he was pretty good as well. I think he just gets in, but I will admit I'm not the strongest proponent of Chase Utley. I think he benefits from me just because I typically vote for those fringe guys so they stay on the ballot.
Yeah, and for me, Utley, it's tough because it's the second base position. Really, it's the fact that there aren't more second basemen in the Hall makes it tough because I try to compare to other Hall of Famers in the same position group, and there's not that many. But I will say he outpaces certain guys. Ryan Sandberg, he's a Hall of Famer. He's got more F4 career than him. He's got more F4 career than Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson played less games, but narrative ball. I would have voted for Jeff Kent, who is a far worse player, in my opinion, than Chase Utley because he couldn't really play defense. But that's the thing. I think Utley's consistency on all three phases of play, he's got the bat. He was actually an insanely good hitter in his prime. He was a great defender, and he was a really underrated base runner. He's actually extremely efficient. It wasn't that he stole
especially
a
when
ton
he's
of bases.
sliding into the shortstops to break up
that.
the double plays.
Yeah, we don't even need to get on him. But yeah, good base runner despite maybe not being the fastest guy. And he has the ring. He's got playoff success, great playoff player. And fun fact, Jimmy Rollins won an MVP. Do you remember that?
I
2007,
do.
Jimmy Rollins won the MVP. Chase Utley was far better that season.
I was literally just about to talk about
was.
his 2007 season because he only played 132 games, had 22 home runs, 103 RBIs, had 976 OPS, and came in eighth.
He came in eighth, and it's not even that necessarily that he should have won, but he was better than Jimmy Rollins.
Right.
So yeah, MVP caliber, and he was like that good, that level for like 5 straight seasons.
Yeah,
of like 8 WAR. So
and those 5 seasons are doing a lot of heavy lifting.
I was gonna say you're right about the lack of longevity. Even when he was playing later in his career, he wasn't the same guy.
Right.
He wasn't playing every day. He couldn't hit the same way. Couldn't defend the same way. But I think that he did enough in his prime to get in there. Yeah, because I do think we need some more love for second baseman. There's not enough. And even then, you got a guy like Lou Whitaker who isn't even in the Hall of Fame. I found that out last night. I'm like looking at, I'm like, what are we doing here? Lou Whitaker's 9th all time in F4 for second baseman, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. I was losing my shit. But yeah, I personally, I would put Lou Whitaker in, and I would put Chase Utley in.
I think that's fair. All right, the last guy we're going to talk about in our joint, that we're in agreement on, is Billy Wagner. And relief pitcher is another position you kind of need to adjust the bar on, because obviously they're not going to accrue the WAR that any position does, especially starting pitchers. Like, you could almost need to reinvent the bar, because like for instance, for position players, like, or I guess pitchers too, 60 to 65 career WAR is like usually the benchmark, give or take. And with relief pitchers, like, if you're really really good and have a long career, you might get 20 WAR. Like that. Yeah. That's kind of what you need to look at. So you almost can't even include WAR when you're talking about relievers. But for me, when I think of a relief pitcher, it's how dominant were they, not just good. Like, this is going to sound so backwards and totally anti-baseball purist, but like, I think anyone can rack up saves. Like, anyone can have years where they like lead the league in saves. If you're like a quality reliever on a good team, you're going to rack up saves.
Yeah, that's a
like,
secondary. That's
right.
Like, I don't.
Saves are a team stat.
Yeah, I feel, because there are people who say saves are the big reliever stat, but I'm I think they're important later on down the line after you get through some other stats first.
Right. So like for me, I immediately think, how dominant were you? Because again, you might, like, for example, like if Billy Wagner played with Mariano Rivera, Billy Wagner's not saving games over Mariano Rivera. Like, so you can't always use saves, and obviously Billy Wagner accrued many a save on his own, but like, he was extremely dominant practically every single year. He had 1 year in his 16-year career with an ERA above 2.7. Everything else is usually sub 2.3.
See, I know that already, but just hearing you say it out loud is just silly.
Yeah, like this is a guy, and we don't hear it as much now because the reliever usage is much different than it used to be. But like, Billy Wagner was a guy that was in Cy Young conversations because of how dominant he was. And I think being a lefty and just being who he was, like, we need to show love for second base. We also need to show some love for relievers too. Like, Billy Wagner was dominant, and not just dominant. He was dominant for basically 16 years. Like, we'll call it 12 of the 16 years. He was absolutely dominant. 3 of the other 4, he was very good. So that's basically what it comes down to. Any knock on Billy Wagner is basically, you don't like relief pitchers.
Pretty much. And I think it's like Andrew Jones for me. It's very simple. He's the best left-handed reliever ever. It's pretty
Case
easy.
Closed. Done. Over.
I feel like if you're the best at any one position, you should probably be in. And it's the consistency too. Like, because we know relievers, they don't always have a good season 2 seasons in a row. They don't always have a good season 3 seasons in a row. Talk about pretty much 16 straight years of dominant relief pitching, not just good, dominant relief pitching. And he also had his best season, probably, arguably, at age 39. So theoretically, he could have kept going if he wanted to.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, one of those. Late 30s, which you're not supposed to have your best season then. So
he had a 1.43 ERA.
Yeah, his last season in Atlanta is
nuts,
silly, just
absolutely.
Silly. I mean, if you want to talk about going out on top, geez.
69 innings pitched that year.
Nice. And yeah, he's throwing 70 innings at age 38. Like, that's like the high end of relievers now. Like, Erasmo Ramirez had 80 something innings last year, and he had the most innings for relievers or something.
Yeah,
like it's nuts. So Billy Wagner should get in this time, based on the vote. It'll be close, but I think he's going to get there. I feel like he has enough hype now, and he's close enough to the end of his tenure on the ballot that he should get the push. At least if it's not this year, please, on his 10th year, get him in. This dude is amazing.
No, it needs to be now. Like,
it does. It does. I agree.
Yeah. All right. So that's our 8 that we had in common. Trey, you had 2 guys that you feel strongly about that I do not. Why don't you break it down?
Well, I've got one that I feel strongly about.
Okay.
The other one I'm like, tough, but I'm going to give him my vote because it's his last chance. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and start with him. I'll start with Gary I personally I did not vote for him last year. if I had more than 10 last year, I would have, but you don't, so I didn't. And it was tough. I went back and forth a lot on this because in terms of the bat, Gary Sheffield was incredible, an absolutely amazing right-handed hitter, had some absolutely elite season, MVP caliber on the offense. He's also the worst defensive outfielder literally ever. I mean, it's not even particularly close. He was so bad. The thing is, he wouldn't be playing outfield nowadays. So if I think about modern standards, he'd be a DH or a first baseman or something. That wouldn't help him necessarily that much, but it would help him a little bit. And because of that, I think I'm going to give him the nod, even though he was on Balco. It's tough. There's another guy who you'll get into who is a similar case who, again, if he doesn't get in by year 10, I'd probably give him my vote, but it's tough. Cause like with the steroid guys, I like to have a guy, if I'm going to vote him in, that is so much better than everybody else or close to it. And Sheffield was great. And he was like, obviously Hall of Fame caliber, but he wasn't quite that good, but I'm still going to put him in. This is a tough one for me. I'm actually struggling with it right now.
Yeah. For me,
I'm going to give it to him because it's his 10th year.
Right. And I completely, that's a strategic vote that you mentioned earlier. Like,
yeah,
just to see if there's enough support.
I don't think
do your part kind of thing.
I don't think he gets in.
I agree,
but it'll be close. And it might open the door a bit for A-Rod later because.
Oh, if that's the case, then he can have my 10th vote because I want A-Rod in.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, Sheffield's a presumed steroid guy. If he gets 60% of the vote, that's like, okay, that's close-ish. And then it's like, well, right. A-Rod was about twice the player of him, so now what? And then it's tough. I think that it's never going to be perfect.
The defense matters,
but that's really the toughest part because he could have been a bad defender and I would have been fine. It's just that he's literally the worst.
Yeah, exactly. And like, if you want to view him as a DH, which he was never really a DH, but like, I have no problem viewing him that way because same thing with relief pitchers and, a second baseman, not so much, but like relief pitchers, like I think DHs just get overlooked. Like, if you're the best at your craft, whether it's being a relief pitcher, whether it's a designated hitter, whether it's a pitcher only, like people still like the people who hate the DH think that pitchers need to hit. And I'm just like, that's so backwards. And that's not a conversation we need to get into, but like, if I'm just looking at Gary Sheffield's offensive stats, yeah, there's plenty there to go off of. It's just, if you're only doing one thing, if you're only hitting, if you're only pitching, if you're only doing one thing, you have to be like one of the best. And listen, Sheffield has over 500 home runs. Like, you could easily qualify him as one of the best. But if I compare him to the last DH to get in, Edgar Martinez got in basically on his last chance, and he was a far better hitter than Sheffield was. So it's like, just going off that, I think Sheffield, for me, he's just on the outside looking in. If like tomorrow the Hall of Fame's like, hey, we're a little too strict with our voting, we're going to add some more guys, I think Sheffield would be like one of the first people in that regard. But like, with the standards the Hall has now, and listen, those standards are always changing, like based on who gets in sometimes. I do think Sheffield's on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair because he's just getting in for me essentially because it's his last year. I mean, I wouldn't have voted for him if it wasn't. But he's going to be exiting the ballot next year anyways, so that'll open up a vote spot, so I don't feel too bad about it.
Yeah. All right, what about your other guy?
Okay, so my other strategic pick is Bobby Abreu. I freaking love Bobby Abreu. I think that he
doubles machine.
He doubles machine. He was an on-base machine, which is personally, I think, where he kind of gets lost in the shuffle because, like, you look at his base numbers, almost a 3.45 slash line, which is good, but it's not like that doesn't automatically make you elite. It's the on base. He was with guys who had as many plate appearances as him. He had over 10K in the outfield. He had one of the highest on base percentages out of all those guys, and that's something I think you need to look at a little bit. Also, like I said earlier, I like to go and look at contemporaries. Who are your peers that are in the Hall of Fame already?
Right.
Bobby Abreu has very similar career to guys like Andre Dawson or Dave Winfield, who are both Hall of Famers. He's got a better career than Harold Baines, who, again, that was a veterans committee, so that's tough. But if Harold Baines is a Hall of Famer, then Bobby Abreu is a Hall of Famer.
Then
You know what I
literally
mean?
everyone's a Hall of Famer.
Pretty much. So, but I think something else about Abreu that gets lost is the stolen base. 400 stolen bases, and he was an efficient base stealer as well, 77% for his career. So, I think he does deserve a little boost based on that. That's not like that's 400 steals. That's a lot. That's like top 75 all time. And then you add the offensive capabilities, the on base, the consistency factor, 14 seasons of at least a 350 on base percentage and 8 seasons of at least a 400 on base percentage. So is he? I think actually, yes, he's a Hall of Famer based on other guys at his position that have gotten in that are either just as good or slightly worse. And I think he'll stay on the ballot for 10 seasons. I don't think he'll make it. But I'd like him to, because I think he was a really good player and he often gets kind of lost.
Yeah, for me, he's another guy on the
And
outside
presumably
looking
clean
in.
as well.
Right, right. Which isn't, part of the conversation.
And he was in that era. So it's
right.
Yeah.
For me, like just a very, very solid and quality ball player. I just don't think the peak was ever high enough.
Yeah, that's fair. And I agree, because he didn't have the high peak.
Right.
He didn't have an MVP season or something that was.
He never finished top 10 in MVP voting.
Yeah. So he arguably should have a couple times. But
sure. But I'm just saying, like, he never did. He never had that one season where it's just like, holy shit. Like,
yeah,
this is like, he had some great seasons, don't get me wrong, but like, the consistency and the longevity needs to support the dominance. And just like the dominance needs to be accompanied by the longevity and the consistency, and for me, like, he has two of the three, but he's missing that also critical third one, and that's the dominance.
Yeah, he wasn't a purely dominant player at any point. That is true. He's kind of similar to Mark Burley on the pitching side,
right?
A guy who
it's a really good comparison,
really consistent, above average pitcher through a ton of innings.
Mm-hmm.
But was he ever that good? No. He had, a couple starts here and there where he had no hitters in the perfect game, obviously, but
yeah,
never a full season where he was purely dominant. Bobby Abreu, I think, should stay on the ballot at least, for sure. And then you had one that I did not have. So would you like to get into that?
Listen, I mentioned it earlier that I don't really care about the steroid era. I think it's part of the conversation for sure. You can't just totally discount it. But listen, there's a difference between being clean and just never having gotten caught, in my mind. Like, I think there's plenty of guys who managed to avoid all these reports and went on to have great careers, but it doesn't mean they were necessarily clean. We'll just never know. So I try not to put too much into it. And then I also believe that there's guys that got popped or were named just because they were associated, right? Not because they actually failed the test, or if it was a false positive. Like, we just never know. So
have you ever looked into Sammy Sosa about his situation? It's like he might not have tested positive for anything.
Right. And point. Sammy Sosa is another fascinating person to talk about.
Yeah, just if he's clean, he's a Hall of Famer, easy. And like he might be.
I don't even think it's that easy. Like,
that's over true. 600
Actually, home
right.
I think he falls into that Gary Sheffield category.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But if he was clean, I think I'd.
But at least he won an MVP. Sammy Sosa, that is.
Yeah, he did do that.
Regardless, that's just to say I don't factor it heavily. I'm looking at the dominance. And like I just mentioned, the dominance needs to be supported by longevity and consistency. And this guy has all three. And if you have all three, you're getting my vote. And that's Manny Ramirez. And, Trey pointed out before we start recording, not only did he get popped once, he got popped twice. And that matters.
Yeah. I'll get into that. Go ahead.
But like, if we're talking about the best players, or like one of the best players in the game at his, like, while he played and at his prime and all that stuff, Manny qualifies. And listen, there's a lot of personality and a lot of baggage that comes with Manny being Manny. Like that was legitimately a saying, high fiving guys in the crowd as he's like throwing a ball in from the outfield, getting the guy out too. I might add, hiding in the monster and like during the game,
cutting off a
weird
ball
things
for no reason. You ever seen that clip?
Yeah,
That's
that
one
one
of my
too.
favorites.
That one too. But like if you're going off sheer dominance and being one of the best players in the game, like he had like 8 or 9 top 10 MVP finishes, never won one, but like was always right there, always in the conversation. And honestly, you look at the numbers without obviously knowing who won those awards and who finished ahead of him. Like you look at his numbers in 1999. This going back a ways. Manny Ramirez had 44 home runs and 165 RBIs. He had an 1100 OPS.
Bad.
174 OPS plus, and he only came in third in MVP voting.
What
So
year was
it's
that? Who was it?
99.
99. Who would have gotten first in the AL in the 99?
Like, and that might not even be like the most absurd season with some of these numbers. Like he led the league in slugging and OPS and obviously RBIs that year, and like came in third.
I'm guessing a
So
Yankee won it.
I can only imagine, but that's just to say that like you if you're going off of the performance, Manny belongs. Like he deserves to be in without a shadow of a doubt. And the reason that really got me down this rabbit hole is in 2008 he was traded from Boston to the Dodgers in the I don't know if it was the infamous Boston um LA trade with like Beckett and Adrian Gonzalez, but it was around the same time. So
It might have been.
yeah, it might have been. I can't actually remember. Regardless, in Boston, first half of the year, I think he was like age 36 season, so certainly not in his prime. Manny was having a really, really solid first half of the year, like a 920 OPS, like hitting around 300. Had like 20 home runs at the time of the trade. You know, all great stuff. Gets traded to the Dodgers, and Manny has a 50 game stretch that I think would rival Barry Bonds. Like
It's pretty silly.
in Barry Bonds like best 50 game stretch, I think Manny would get really close to it. And this is an age 36 season. He went 396, 489, 743 slugging for a 1232 OPS, had 17 home runs and 53 RBIs in 53 games. So that puts him on a pace for 162 RBIs over a full season. And that was age 36. Like there was calls for him to win the NL MVP being a deadline addition. Like that's how good he was in age 36. So it's just like that's just a one small part of Manny's career. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think it's very similar to the A-Rod conversation where it's like if you are okay with steroid users, you'll vote for him. If you're not, then you won't. So
I would have if I had more than 10.
I would vote for him before Sheffield in a heartbeat. But I get why you're voting for
Yeah,
Sheffield.
I would as well if they were both on the same year.
Yeah.
Manny will eventually get my vote when he hits the 10-year mark. It's just it's the fact that he got suspended twice. Because like you get popped once, okay. That's bad, obviously. But getting it twice means you didn't really learn anything. At least
I wouldn't either if I'm
that's how
dropping
it's
40
perceived.
bombs and 120 RBIs every
Yeah,
year.
I'm saying that's just how it's perceived by voters. It's like, well, you had a chance and you didn't use it very well, but like, there's probably other guys that did the same thing and didn't get
Right.
caught. Yeah, he'll get it eventually from me. If I had more than 10, he would be on it because yes, he's the best hitter on this ballot. There's just not really a question. He's I mean, regardless, we have his baseball reference page, which I just get so much enjoyment out of looking at.
Yeah,
So
he's one of the more fun ones for
that's
sure.
a Hall of Fame baseball reference page. There you go. So maybe we'll give him the BB Ref Hall of Fame award or something. But yeah, I like Manny. He'll get a vote from me when he's in his 10th year, maybe sooner, depending on what the ballots look like. But I just couldn't. I didn't want to give him a spot over a guy who was clean or is graduating essentially. Um,
Right. That's fair.
yeah, because like you point out A-Rod. A-Rod is still so much higher of a level because he was a great defender and Manny wasn't. But Manny was just as good of a hitter. So yeah, no, I don't have any issue with Manny getting votes. I don't think he'll make it, but wouldn't mind it at all.
Looking at the rest of the ballot, we just want to run through quickly some guys that they fall into the Mark Burley category of like really good conversation, but ultimately not a Hall of Famer. Obviously, Mark Burley falls into that category. For me, I voted for this guy last year, and when I'm having to make cuts and really tough decisions, I just can't get there with him. Torrey Hunter, I
Great player.
love Torrey Hunter. Was one of my favorite players growing up. But like I literally had a really good comp for him in Andrew Jones, and Torrey Hunter was just never on the level of Andrew
Yeah, he was
Jones.
close. He was really close. He was
Really
really close. Just
close.
didn't have the home run the hitting ability
Right.
as Jones.
Right.
But yes, defensively, absolutely elite.
Yeah. Andy Pettit is another guy I'm actually surprised you didn't vote for. And like there's some respects to say Andy Pettit's one of the best, if not the best, postseason pitchers of all time. But like his regular season career is basically Mark Burley.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting at with Pettit, and also Pettit's a admitted steroid guy. Like he
Right.
took HGH, he said he did it. So, I mean, respect honestly for admitting it, and potentially another guy that could get a vote in his last year. But
Right.
yes, basically Mark Burley with more playoff success, and also took steroids.
Yeah.
So it's like those kind of even each other
Hinder.
out in a sense, like
Right.
to
And
the point where he's like Hall of very good for me.
yeah,
right now.
exactly. And just a little bit more insight to my thought process, especially when it comes to like the steroid stuff. I don't fault guys for taking HGH.
Yeah, well, it's more of a
it's to get healthy.
pretty much. That's at least
It's
why he said that he took it.
oversimplification,
Yeah,
but it doesn't boost you to the effect that like anabolic steroids do. So
true.
to
True.
me, there's a difference. I don't care about any of it. But like if you, it's just how I am.
I just like exploring the nuance of each case because it's interesting.
Right.
Personally, I don't really.
Right. But I think even without, like, let's say Andy Pettit's stats are what they are and he's not a steroid user, I'm still probably not voting for him.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I think it's so close though, just because he was that dude in the playoffs. That's definitely true.
You were so comfortable,
and he had a lot of opportunities and innings to fail.
Stone cold,
and did
stone
not.
cold. Yep.
So I think that should only be a boost to him, and not take away from other guys who didn't pitch as much in the playoffs as him. But yeah, he still wouldn't quite get there.
Yeah. Another guy, Francisco Rodriguez, like just a really he's that guy who was a quality reliever for many, many years. But I think he was dominant at times, but you can compare him to Billy Wagner and he doesn't come close to what Billy Wagner did. So like if people wanted to vote for Francisco Rodriguez just to kind of readjust the bar for relief pitchers to get in, totally cool with that. And I almost gave him a vote still. But for me,
I gave him a vote last year.
Yeah, right. But for me, he's just a shade under where I would think a Hall of Fame reliever would be.
I think he's probably safe though to stay on the ballot because he did get almost.
I want him to
11%.
stay on the ballot for sure.
Yeah, I think he'll stay on the ballot. But yeah, as for current reliever standards, not quite.
Yeah. Another one that's worth mentioning just briefly. Like you don't have to go into too much. Is probably Omar Vizquel.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about him too much.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
He's screwed. He's not going to get in.
Yeah.
There's a reason why. If you want more info, go check it out yourself.
That really just came to me as I said his name.
Yeah, I always forget he's there because like I basically disregarded him as a human being at this point. So
yeah, I kind of hand up. That's my bad. Don't vote for him.
Yeah, no, he's lost so much. Like he was like kind of tracking. Okay, he's not even good enough, dude. I don't care. Like he was a good
defensively.
Defender. They're better defenders than him, and he had an 82 OPS plus. Garbage.
Yeah.
Get out of
here. Right. The last guy that I know you really wanted to mention is David Wright, who I know has some of the ballots I've seen submitted. He has gotten some love For me, it's pretty simple. David Wright was tracking very well, not only to be a Hall of Famer, but to be a no doubt Hall of Famer. And then injuries.
Yeah.
Like we can't go giving votes to guys who should have been Hall of Famers had they stayed healthy. If that's the case, Steven Strasburg is a first ballot Hall of Famer, in
Dude,
my
I'm
opinion.
so down.
So it's like if we're doing that, then we got to do it for everybody. And like I can fully appreciate what David Wright was and should have been, but what he is right now is just on the outside looking in, and he's one of the biggest what ifs in baseball history.
Yeah, he's honestly David Wright. Like, I know he's a Met and everything, and we're not supposed to like them, but I like David Wright. He's from Virginia. Like, he was a good dude. He played hard.
Yeah, if you're
Okay.
from Virginia,
Lunch
you're a
pail
good dude.
guy, you know. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, he would have made it easily
Yeah.
if he plays even a mediocre 30s. He makes it because his prime
His
was
20s were
elite.
nuts.
Yeah, MVP caliber, didn't win one, but could have. Had multiple seasons with 8 WAR, I believe. So that should tell you.
Yeah,
What you
he
need to
just
know.
needed like 3 more seasons of 4 WAR, and he's in,
Yeah,
even
and
without the longevity.
his injury, spinal stenosis, it's different. It just he couldn't physically play at the end, and even honestly before the end of his career in like 15 and 14, he wasn't the same guy.
At all.
So it's just a big bummer because like he would have been in if he had played a normal career.
Anyways, that does it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed our Hall of Fame discussion. We will dive back into the off season when things start rolling, hopefully here before the holiday season. I think most teams like to get most of their spending done prior to the new year. I think the winter meetings are in 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. We should see some more action then. So we will dive back into that conversation then and see where our predictions stand up. I think it's safe to say neither you or I will do pretty well.
So yeah, no, we already 0 for 2 on
yeah.
the big free agents.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get any better, but who cares? We won't have to talk about it. Yeah. All right. Appreciate you guys listening. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page if you're listening to this on the audio platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate you, and make sure you are subscribed so you never miss a video that we upload. Again, appreciate you listening. Follow us at our handles below. The main account on Twitter is at District BSB. We will catch you guys next time. Later.
Peace.